There's so many questions.
That's fine. I'm so happy to talk to you. And look, this is like my last hurrah with Charm. So this is it. I'm happy to do it. And I'm so happy. Like you've been an amazing support for the show. So happy to.
Thank you. Kristen Maldonado here, and welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Planet, where we cover the world of entertainment while also shining a light on representation and inclusion. This week, we're joined by Joey Falco, best known as the showrunner for season 4 of CW's Charmed. We're going all the way back to the beginning, talking about all 4 seasons of the series, what that series finale moment at the Halliwell Manor meant, and the wild places the show would have gone if it had gotten a 5th season. It was so much fun picking Joey's brain and just learning so much more about the series, so I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for joining me. You know, this has been a wild, incredible time covering Charmed over the last 4 seasons, and I'm so glad to speak with you and just hear about what your experience has been like. I mean, I know I got tons of questions, but also the Charmed fans have sent me so many questions too. Before we really get into Charmed, I want to hear more about your career and how you got started and writing projects of the past. Did you always know you wanted to be in entertainment? How did you get into writing and then show running?
I think I've wanted to write television since I was 15, at least subconsciously, not really knowing it was a job at the time, but it was always sort of my passion and my obsession. Watching shows like Buffy and Charmed when I was, a teenager sitting at home in my basement. I originally thought I was going to get into political journalism and do that. And I was in DC for a little while and I hated it and I hated everything about it. And I realized it was a terrible choice. And then I kind of on a whim just applied to USC's film school for my master's because I didn't know anything about TV writing. And I thought it was a way to sort of get my foot in the door, even though it ended up being a way to accumulate a whole lot of debt as well. But that got me out to LA and I learned a few things and met some amazing people. And from there, just sort of started throwing scripts out into the world and hoping someone read them and liked them. And I sold a few projects that never got made. And my first job was I met Tim Crane, who created Heroes, through another pilot I'd written so that he liked. And he hired me for my first job on Heroes Reborn, which was amazing, even though it was, the show is what it was. It was super fun. I loved the Heroes franchise and we did some cool things. But it was just such an amazing film school experience for me where I got to live in Toronto for 2 months and produce the show and see what it was like to make genre TV. And it was just Tim really let me do a lot. He was such a great mentor. And that was very life-changing. And I met some amazing people like Nazanin Contractor, who played Inara. I met on Heroes Reborn and I sort of forced her to come do Charmed. And Rhea Kilstead, who played Dr. Julie in season 1. I pulled in from Heroes Reborn. So a lot of people from that show I still am great friends with. But then I just bounced around genre show. Sleepy Hollow, I did a season, the very last, kind of the crappy last season of Sleepy Hollow after Abby was killed. That was a tough year. I did a little bit of this show Treadstone that was also with Tim Crane that I just did a little bit helping him on getting that show off the ground. And then what I've always wanted to, I find Charm came, a job on Charm came up 4 years ago, which was sort of a dream for me to sort of get in the world in the CW, writing genre, writing soap, writing some little comedy. And I met Brad Silverling, who was the producing director of that. He directed the pilot of the show and still the EP on Charmed. And he kind of got my foot in the door with the showrunners in that first season. And yeah, I spent 4 crazy years there, worked my way up to showrunner in the final season, which is my first showrunning job with Jeff and Nikki. So that's the journey.
When you kind of went from writing to showrunning, what does that kind of change for you?
I actually loved it. I mean, this was a very special case where there were 3 of us running it, which allowed us to maintain lives. Nikki had a baby this past year. I had a baby this past year. I don't think we could have done that if we were solo showrunners. It would have not been possible, just the amount of time that goes into it. But dividing it up by 3 allowed us to do that. So that was amazing. But no, I loved, you go from pitching ideas and hoping hoping your idea gets in the show, pushing for that idea to get in the show, putting all that in often it doesn't. And you're following someone else's vision. And you write your scripts and someone is rewriting those scripts. And so you have all this love for the show, and sometimes it doesn't quite translate the way you envision it on screen. And so finally getting to see my vision for the show manifested, because there was no one that could say no to me except, Jeff and Nikki and I had our own little, we had a great relationship with the three of us. Would check each other's worst impulses, and we sort of found a sweet spot that worked for all three of us. But getting to do that and to work so closely with the crew and the cast who I'd gotten to know over the years, and finally be that, that person who they could come to when they had an issue, and being able to manage a room in a way that I, had learned over the years what worked, what didn't work, and kind of form my own style and create I hope a healthy environment in the room was something I was really excited to do. And yeah, I think we accomplished most of it this year, but it's great. It's exhausting, and I'm so excited. I'm kind of excited to have a little break now, but it's a fun job.
I got some curious fans over here. Bristol Matt 83 on Twitter wants to know, he's coming in strong with some really good questions of
I know that guy on Twitter, Matt C.
Yep. What goes into like a reboot? Like, how does that work? Like, are there caveats you're given or clauses by CBS of like, you can do this, you can't do that? Like, especially when it comes to like a show that has like, this older IP and protecting that and like future plans for it. Like, how does that work?
It's an interesting question. And I can only partially answer it because I wasn't the one who developed it. And I mean, most of those conversations happen when you're developing it. And so that was Jenny Ehrman and Amy Varden and Jessica O'Toole who did that, 5-ish years ago. And I know they clearly had lots of discussions about what could and couldn't go in related to the original show and what part of that IP they were allowed to develop. And I honestly don't know what went on. I know they wrote a pilot set in the 1970s. Then the whole show was going to be set in the 70s. And that was the original idea for the show. It was going to be a prequel to Charmed. And that got tossed out. And they put another year of development, making it what it is today. Once I sort of stepped in the showrunning department and started to have those conversations with the network and studio in season 4, they didn't have any sort of caveats about what we could and couldn't do. The only time, honestly, it ever came up that they ever wanted to have a discussion was when they heard about the final scene at the Halliwell Manor and whether or not we were going to get original cast involved, and that what we wanted to do with that final scene and what that meant for the show is really the only time they even picked up the phone to say, let's hear what your plan is, because this could get interesting. But they've been largely hands off.
Another question that Matt has is like, when shows are being pitched, right? Like they probably have outlines for like a couple of seasons. So like, was that the case for Charmed? And if so, like, did it completely deviate when, at the end of season 1 and like that change in showrunners?
There are some showrunners, creators that will pitch 6 seasons of a show right off the bat. That doesn't always happen. I mean, that's probably more the exception. Typically you'll pitch a season, a pilot in a season with like legs for what could go forward. But you almost never hear of a full, 6-season Bible that someone is pitching outside of like the guy that did Babylon 5 and a few other shows that people have done it. But I know Amy and Jessica, when they were doing it, had a full first season pitched that we obviously did most of. It changed a little bit at the end. They wanted, in their original pitch, the final scene of the first season was Alyssa Milano was going to show up as Phoebe and launch the multiverse back at the end of season 1. But that did not ever come to fruition when this network decided to make some serious, like heavy creative changes at the end of the first season. And so there was no sort of blueprint moving forward after that. It was kind of a clean slate. Like they actually asked, when they decided to, get rid of a lot of people, they sort of asked the writers to tie up as many loose ends as possible. Like, that's why Nico and Mel kind of went their separate ways. That's why Maggie and Parker went their separate ways. That's why, there really wasn't a big cliffhanger at the end of season 1. There were people showing up at the door to say, you're in charge now, but it wasn't like a big dun 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 because the network very specifically didn't want to they wanted the new showrunners to come in and sort of bring something new to the table.
Then you guys, it felt like in season 4, kind of took what would have happened at the end of season 1 and sort of went off into that a little bit more with the whole, like, you know, bringing back the magical beings and, you know, opening up that whole multiverse. So obviously there was stuff in between there, but like, was that kind of your intention going into season 4? Like, hey, we gotta, you know, obviously address things that have happened, but we want to like go to what we originally had, you know, hoped to see after that first season.
As the sort of only person who survived all these 4 seasons in the writer's room, there were a lot of things I wanted to see happen after that first season that never got to happen. And yeah, like exploring the magical world beyond. To me, after 3 seasons, I know witches versus demons is such a big part of the Charmed lore in the original show. To me, I frankly got bored with it. I find the demons to be too two-dimensional and not morally complex enough, and I would rather, didn't want to. It was like a big thing I talked about Jeff and Nikki at the start of the season, like especially after sort of the conversations the world has been having about police and what their responsibilities are to people and how they should interact with people. Like as the cops of the magical world, I didn't want to see a show where they just went out and killed someone every episode, even if that person was a demon. I just don't think that in 2021 at the time, is the story Charmed should be, even if that's what Charmed was in 1998. Like we wanted to do something new and fresh and different. And that's why you probably noticed like they didn't kill a demon every week this season. They had to deal with much more complex, kind of gray situations that, because that's what real, heroes or, have to do. You can't just blow people up and say you've done your job. So that's why we went into the magical world and creatures that were kind of split the difference between witches and demons, so that we could sort of play with that morality a little bit and make it harder for the Charmed ones to decide how to save the day rather than just open the book, learn a spell, blow up a demon. I know I'm simplifying it, but yeah, anyway, that was our goal.
Well, I love that. And I think you guys did such a great job, even over the course of the 4 seasons, of like tackling gray areas, like, the whole storyline with Macy and the demon side and the witch side, and just like how magic is sort of like whoever wields it, that's where the good and bad kind of comes from. I loved that. And I think you guys really nailed it in this season of tackling, it's obviously a magical world, but you are seeing elements of like things that we're seeing in our society now of like, maybe like people blindly kind of following or listening to what they hear on the internet or, the Gen Cast.
What could we have been referring to with that storyline? I don't know.
So I think you guys really were able to kind of capture the magical world, but also the real world. And I think that's what makes, a genre show so great, is that you can like sort of see these things reflected, but just in like a different way.
Yeah. And that's sort of the show's always had that, from the beginning from the pilot. We got a little criticism in the first season for maybe being a little too on the nose in its politics about what it was trying to say. And so we started to pivot from that. But, that's why with the 4th season, we tried to split that difference, where we still tried to get a pretty strong political message in there about QAnon and people's conspiracy theories and how, but without using those words and without hitting it directly, using the unseen and using the conspiracies in our show, and to tell that story without necessarily telling people we're telling that story.
I want to go back a little bit more to that first season. Obviously, you're coming into a show that has this like established legacy. So like, were there moments where you were trying to like replicate or pay homage to that first show, or was it kind of like we're trying to do our own thing, or finding a balance, or it really depended on the season?
The first season we tried. There was a lot of loyalty to the show and to what the original show, at least the mythology that it promised. I know Amy and Jessica really wanted to. I mean, there's a reason there are stories exploring white lighters and elders and some similar demons in that first season, but it was also really important to not just do the same show over again, to take those ideas and then do a new spin on, like the elders, for example. All of us did not like what the elders were in the original show. We thought they were a little campy and old people in robes, kind of often men, like kind of, telling the witches what to do was not something we wanted to explore. But showing a different version of what elders might be in our new Charmed world, like those kind of uber fashionable CEO, Sheryl Sandberg type women that we explored in the first season, like Charity, was our attempt to sort of, again, put our spin on that mythology. The first season, White Lighter is actually pretty held fairly strong, closely to what the original show did. But then in the second season, Liz Kruger and Craig Shapiro really wanted to put their own spin on what a White Lighter was and unpack that and and what a Dark Lighter was. I thought that storyline worked really well, exploring what made a White Lighter a White Lighter and why there's actually something super problematic about White Lighters, again, like today. So yeah, that again, we're always referencing it in ways, but we never wanted to just copy it, because what's the fun in that? Even if some fans probably would have loved it if we just did the same demons every episode. Mm-hmm. For the people making the show, that just wouldn't have satisfied us.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people are purists. I'm not a purist, so I'm happy to see changes in different things, and like, how can we like reimagine something in like this new world? And I mean, yeah, I think I loved that White Lighter, Dark Lighter kind of balance. And again, you kind of get in those gray areas of like, what does this mean? And like, we're like separating a person's soul. Like that's like some deep stuff.
It's really, can I say fucked up? It's very fucked up. It is. It's twisted, and it's not. And I thought it was really showing how messy the elders were and why that hierarchy needed to be undermined and subverted, and why that our ladies could be a better, could build a better leadership structure, which again was also part of what this season was about as well.
Shippendales wants to know if there were any storylines you really wanted to do but never got a chance to. And so, spinning off of that, obviously we had a little bit of a Twitter conversation with George Northey, who is another former writer on the show, bringing up some lost storylines, so to speak, that never happened. So I was wondering if you could share some of those.
George and his stupid Fitbit that he won't shut up about. Oh, the Fitbit. I don't know what that was. The three of us, you and George and I, were tweeting about the Medusa episode, which you are a big fan of, and everyone is a big fan of. This is an amazing episode of TV, but it just to show like how the process works and how ideas can be tossed out. That episode 15 of the first season maybe was originally George always wanted to do a body swap episode. It was really just going to be a body swap episode. There was no Medusa. It was actually the episode we were going to meet Ray, the girl's dad, for the first time. Obviously that didn't happen for another year, but it was, and there was going to be this demon running around who we were nicknaming Swapsy, who was this, I think, some German demon that he based it on, that it caused their bodies to swap, and that was the bad guy they had to stop in the episode. And somehow Ray brought him into their lives, like through an object, so like a cursed object or something. And it just wasn't working. It was just like we were banging our heads against the wall, and finally, after like a week of it, we like sort of, I remember talking to Amy Rardin about it. We kind of like pulled George aside. It was just like, something's not working here. Something's wrong. Like this episode just doesn't work. And the storyline isn't, it's not engaging enough. It's not what you want it to be. We can tell it's not what you want it to be. And the body, so we were like, okay, the body swap is amazing. It's hilarious, but can we make that the C story, kind of a runner, and find something else to make the heart of the show? And George, as only George can do, came back like 8 hours later the next morning with the entire Medusa story planned out, pitched it to the room, and it was like perfect. And it just came out of nowhere at the last minute, because the script was due like the next day, because we were running behind that season. And he brought that amazing idea to the table, and it crushed. It was an amazing episode that almost did not exist. But that kind of thing happened, all the time, where there are a lot of ideas in the dumpster of charm that we'll never see.
Another one I had written down was, you had mentioned Santa Baby on Twitter.
Oh man. So season 1, episode 9, the Christmas episode, where Hunter takes over Macy's body. He does like a version of like a polyjuice potion or something, and takes her form or something. I honestly forget how it worked, but Hunter the demon is in the body by Madeline Mantock, and Marcos Huevanos, George and I really, really, really wanted him as Madeline come in singing a very sexy, sultry performance of Santa Baby, where she was going to seduce, I I forget if it was Galvin or Harry, someone in that scene. And it was just going to be this almost like a Marilyn Monroe kind of like Santa baby striptease that we did a lot of performances of in the writer's room. And it did not, I don't know what happened. I blame Jessica O'Toole for not letting that onto the show. I don't know if it was, I don't know what the issue was, but we ended up not doing it because it was too silly.
Speaking of musical moments, there were so many good ones over the course of the seasons. Like, you guys had such a talented cast. I mean,
I know.
I was like, was there ever potentially going to be a musical episode? Because, there was so much talent in there. And I loved all the little musical moments you guys did put in.
Yeah, I think every season has a musical moment at some point. In season one, there was, because like in season one, we had not just Sarah and Madeline didn't get to sing in season one, but Natalie Hall, who played Lucy, is a Broadway singer, and it's like an amazing voice. And so that is where we got the a cappella episode. But yeah, but then once we got Jordan Donica, who's just mind blowing, his voice, it kills. I don't know how he does what he does. So yeah, there was obviously conversation about whether we could do a whole musical episode. The problem always ended up being that it's hard and we didn't have time in our schedule. I don't know how Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist does it. I don't know what they do, what their production schedule is like, or what their music budget must be like, but we didn't have the music budget to pull it off properly. Unless we did original songs, and to write and produce 8 original songs would have killed us. We just didn't have time. So it just kept being a conversation that just fell away. So whenever possible, basically whenever I had a chance when I was writing an episode, I tried to force a song in there. Like, I got Madeline to do Forget You in season 2, and I somehow convinced Sarah and Lucy to do Lady Marmalade in season 4, because they're so talented and it's so much fun, and they, even if they put up some fight about it, I know they love doing it. They're so talented, and once they're in there in the recording studio, it's magic. They're incredible. So, and it helped that Rupert was directing both of those episodes, because he can convince them to do things that not every director can. So that definitely helped.
Speaking of Rupert, oh my gosh, he did such an incredible job directing. I was like,
oh, good.
Wow.
And he's come such a long way over his 3 episodes on the show. Like, by the time that we did that 4th season episode together, it's gorgeous. He has such a sense of camera and performance and everything, and mood and tone and style. And he builds he loves his transitions. All he talks about are transitions, and he does beautiful ones. And I think he has an amazing future as a director if he so chooses.
Going into season 2, obviously there was a lot of changes, whole bunch of new showrunners coming in, kind of setting the stage. Mm-hmm. I guess what was that like, kind of going into now, the second season with a whole new vision?
I will be very honest here, because I love you. It was hard. It was really, really hard for those of us that remained from the first season. There were like 4 or 5 of us at the time. And because we'd always seen the show one way. And honestly, the truth is the network did not like the first season. It should be obvious, the fact that they fired a lot of people. Like, they did not like it. It was not the show they wanted. It was too comedic.
Too comedic, you said?
They didn't like the sorority stuff. They thought Maggie was too childish. They wanted something more serious. They wanted something darker. They didn't like as much comedy. And they sort of made that very clear by the choices they made. And so that was the mandate when Liz and Craig came in for season 2. And so it was hard for some of us to we had one idea for what the show was, and suddenly we had to sort of readjust to a new version of the show. For the writers that came in, it was a lot easier because it was sort of the show that they were sort of sold on. But for those of us that had already done a season, it was hard. And it was tense for a few months until we kind of meshed again as a writer's room. It took a month or 2 to sort of get on the same page and figure out what this new show was going to be. And I think it was hard for the cast too. It was a readjustment. But they all got I know some of them loved it at first, like the pivot creatively. Some struggled with it. That's something, when we were deciding on what to do with the 4th season, it was finding a middle ground between what worked in the first season and what worked in the second season. Loved some of the silly zany comedy from the first season and some of the soap, but we also, the style of the show improved between season 1 and season 2. The cinematography improved, the visual effects improved. The sets design, I think, got a lot better, and there was certain elements of it that we really wanted to hold on to and keep what worked visually while doing something tonally that we were a little more excited about closer to season 1. So I think it was just a little bit of an overcorrection. And so we, again, tried to push it back to where we felt the show should be. And I think by the end of the CW started to agree by then.
This second season also introduced us to so many new, incredible characters: Jordan, Abigail, Swan, Kat, eventually Julian. So what was kind of like the thought process kind of bringing people in there? I know, for instance, Bristol Matt 83 wanted to know, like, was Kat supposed to just be in a couple of episodes? Was there like an intention to like keep around longer and maybe it didn't work out?
She was originally meant to be a larger storyline, but the chemistry wasn't there. She and Mel just didn't have it. And we were watching those scenes and we just felt, this happens on TV all the time. I mean, you break a story, you break an arc, you cast someone, you hope for the best. And if the chemistry's not there and they're there as a romantic interest, I'm sorry, it's just not going to work. So we pivoted and pivoted away from that story of Kat and found and tried to bring on a new love interest for Mel.
You see when it does work. I mean, Jordan and Maggie, that slow burn.
But it took a while. I don't know that they really got each other at first, but as they got further and further in, I think they're, Sarah and Jordan Donica like got closer and closer as friends. And I think they understood each other as actors, and their chemistry and just got better and better. And it was really fun to see that grow over 3 seasons. And I mean, obviously Macy and Harry had fantastic chemistry across the board as well.
I'm curious, for that one, was that relationship like, were you guys intending that in that first season to like hint at that, or was it kind of like seeing just like people's reactions and being like, oh, people like them, let's put them together?
Yeah, we started talking about it the first like 2 months of season 1 as we're not going to do it this season, but we want to plant the seeds. Like, we sent up a couple test flares in a couple of episodes. There's an episode where they go on Harry and Macy have to pretend to kind of go be a couple at like Galvin's party or something. And then near the very end, we sort of put them together at that funeral, and there's moments of closeness between them. We were just curious, like, was there anything there? And there was. They had great chemistry. They were fantastic friends. They are both English, so they connected in that way. But the actors, obviously not the characters. But and so when season 2 rolled around and we sort of had those early conversations with Liz and Craig, we mentioned that was something that we had toyed with, but we hadn't pursued yet. And Liz loved the idea of it, and obviously pursued it wholeheartedly, starting in that very first episode of season 2. Because they do. They just had great chemistry.
Since we're already talking romances here, there was also Abigail, and it just seemed like everybody had chemistry with her, but people were really enjoying her with Mel, and then Swan and Ruby. So can you tell us a little bit about those?
Of course. So Abimel was never meant to be anything for the first like year and a half. Some of us in the room, Aziza Apabutin in particular, really pushed for it, really wanted to see it happen. She loved their chemistry. And so we started but I don't think there were issues morally with Abby after the second season, where I think Liz and Craig weren't like really comfortable making her Mel's love interest. And then Poppy, for personal reasons, decided she wanted to leave the show at the end of season 3. So we knew that was coming well in advance of, early in season 3. So it was never going to happen at that point. But some of us in our episodes kind of snuck in some moments that we thought were like kind of nods of what could be. Like when Carrie Williams and I were writing episode 316, which was the one where Mel's like super pregnant. Mm-hmm. Because Mel Diaz was super pregnant. And she and Abby have quite a few scenes together, and we probably wrote it a little flirtier than we otherwise would, because we just loved the chemistry. We wanted to see what could have been there, but of course, it just couldn't happen because of Poppy, her what she wanted for her career and where she was going and all that. So as good, but Poppy just is one of those actresses that has chemistry with everyone, and so even though we literally never intended it for that first season, and really ever, she just radiates that heat with characters. And I think the same thing happened on the Shannara Chronicles, where I talked to someone who worked on it, where her character was not supposed to have a relationship with a queer relationship with that other woman. I forget the other character's name, but like she just has that heat, and like the character fans picked up on it until they started to explore it some more. As for Swan, this season we knew we wanted Ruby to be with someone else and sort of have her own life. It's just bullshit that oftentimes in a show where there's a lesbian character and they meet one other lesbian in that world, that they must be together because there are only two lesbians allowed in television, and when you see each other you must. It's crazy. It's not how the world works. And so we wanted to flesh out the queer community and build out the witch community and show Ruby having her own life and what it's like for Mel to move on, but also still see your ex. And there's so many things you can do with that. It was really important to us not to just let Ruby disappear because she's no longer going to be sleeping with Mel. But as for that Swan part, that was a total, we knew she was when we broke the story in the room, it was just, Ruby, Mel sees Ruby with a new girlfriend, random person. And I was writing that script, and it was just, I was sitting in my computer and I was just like bored with the scene when I was writing it. And so I just started thinking about like who would be the most ridiculous and unexpected person that would be the hardest for Mel to see Ruby with. And also a character that I always sort of secretly thought might be bi for the past couple seasons. And so Swan, I just sort of threw Swan in the script and texted Jeff and Nikki to make sure they weren't going to kill me for doing it. And they thought it was, they really liked it. And so it just sort of happened last minute. And it was fun. It was fun to get Kristen on the show this year because she's so funny and talented. And she was so busy making like these like Hallmark movies that we couldn't get her very much at all this season other than that episode, but it was nice to see her one last time.
Switching gears a little bit to some powers, again going back to season 2, we've got Victor Bennett on YouTube who wants to know, like, why did you guys end up changing Mel and Maggie's powers in season 2?
In terms of their powers, that was just a personal choice Liz and Craig made going into season 2, where I don't think they particularly responded to the original powers, that Maggie's empathy and Mel's time stopping. I will say the time stopping, time freezing wasn't a really difficult power to write to in season 1. It was, the whole writer's room struggled with it because in any battle, in any moment, Mel could just go like this and everyone would freeze and it was over. So either the scene's over and there's no tension and there's no stakes, or you jimmy up an excuse every episode why this particular demon is immune to Mel's time stopping, and it just got old. And so we kind of, even in season 1, we kind of got sick of it creatively. And so it was in season 2, Liz and Craig decided to sort of strip their powers as a way of giving them new powers that could be a little more dynamic.
We also have a question from Amusement Graphics who wants to know, who is that trio of dark and light that is referenced in season 2, episode 16?
We originally had storylines planned related to Abby and 2 other sisters of hers, and things that were going to them trying to take the power of 3. And so when we put that little poem with the Ghost Witch lady, it was a kind of an oblique reference to that potential storyline, that when the world shut down and the production shut down after 19 episodes in season 2, a lot of the potential storylines for how that season was going to wrap up and how we would launch a prospective season 3 changed. Part of it was like fan response to Abby and issues. People had a lot of issues with Abby and how she related to Macy. And I think it just, for a lot of creative reasons, that story kind of fizzled out. And we decided not to go down that road. COVID just caused a big change of plans. And some people are think maybe in season 4 that Inara and her 2 sisters are somehow the trio of dark, but sure, they're not really supposed to be.
Going into season 3, we get introduced to cousin Josefina, who really has come through for the sisters time and time again. I would love to hear a little bit more about that character. I mean, she's a transgender witch. I really thought it was so powerful, that symbolism of the magical abilities that she did develop. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
No, that was a big part of that 3rd season. Something we wanted to do from day one was introduce their trans cousin. I don't think they had met. At one point they knew her when she was quite a bit younger, before she transitioned, but that we sort of wiped that out, because we had a lot of conversations with GLAAD and their representatives and people in the trans community to try to get this right, since we didn't have any trans writers on the show in the writers' room. So through all those conversations, we sort of settled on what her arc was going to be, and we found Mariah, who's amazing and like so funny and witty, and I think this might even be her first like big jobs, and she did an amazing job for like a new actress. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, we wanted to tell the trans story without telling a transition story. It's not something we don't want to tell that story. That's not what this show is about, and that's not. There's more to being trans than transitioning, and so using magic to get at the emotional growth that Josefina went through over the years, and in becoming a woman and like becoming a witch was really important to us. And so yeah, I thought we all had so much fun with that character and with that actress. And so when we were doing season 4, it was like a no-brainer to get her back and use her on the show in like a pretty epic way by the end of the season, like integral to the storyline, not just a casual passerby character. She's helped save the world.
Sean Alexander wants to know if there were any plans for anything else with the rest of the Vera family in Puerto Rico, or maybe any plans to like see Marisol again.
Valerie, who plays Marisol, is amazing, and we love getting her on the show whenever we can. We couldn't for a little while during COVID because we couldn't fly a lot of Americans up without a long quarantine, and there was an issue. That's why we stopped seeing her for a while, like it's during season 3. But yeah, every season we've pitched these storylines in Puerto Rico, with aunts and cousins, and more about Marisol's past and what it was like growing up for her and how she got the Book of Shadows. And there was a whole sequence. I think it might have been an episode I did with Carrie at 316, but we ended up throwing it out and doing something else because, one, it was like a production issue. We shoot in Vancouver, and it's very hard to replicate Puerto Rico in Vancouver. And it just kept falling away. It kept falling out of the storyline. So yeah, it's something we really wanted to do. And maybe season 5, we would have finally figured out a way to do it, but it just never made it. When we, take those 1,000 ideas at the start of the season and filter them down into what we want, it always got lost.
And now you guys wrote in, obviously, Melanie Diaz's real pregnancy into the story. And
yeah,
that's some big questions here about that. Sean Not Mendez on Twitter wants to know, like, what happened to Mel's future baby? And MLPEGR wants to know, like, who was the other parent to Mel's child in this story that you guys created? I
believe that the future baby lives on in a universe that is not the one that our characters are heading toward. They changed the future, so that future is only going to happen. So whoever that baby was is not necessarily the baby that Mel is going to have now moving forward in her life. Like that future no longer exists. They changed it. In terms of who the sperm donor was, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure she used a great IVF clinic and found a great donor. It is not someone she had sex with. It was IVF.
There were so many theories about like who Kaela was. Did you guys ever consider making her Mel's child in the future?
I mean, we talked about every possible version of who Kaela was and could be, but it became really important to tie her to Macy in some way, and so that's why we didn't go that route, that it was Mel's future baby.
In that third season, right, you end with Macy's death, going to the tree, and kind of like setting the stage for like, okay, there's gonna be another charmed one coming in. Did you know like who you guys wanted that to be from the beginning, or was there possibilities of it being someone like Josefina? How did you guys end up landing on Kaela as that new character to come in?
We never really talked about it being Josefina. We really wanted a new character from the outside to kind of bring fresh life into the show, and so kind of using a pre-existing character didn't feel like, I don't know, big enough for us. So that was sort of never something we entertained. It was something, you know, the previous showrunners, Liz and Craig, sort of had to pitch the network on the fact that a new character was coming and that she was going to be connected to Macy via stem cells. But in terms of who that character was and what she was like, then fell to the new show, to me, Jeff, and Nikki over the summer, where we sort of crafted her personality and what we wanted out of her, you know, the artist, that incredibly vibrant personality that she has that just sort of contrasts with anything we've ever seen on the show. And then once we had that, we found Lucy, who basically is that person in every way. So she was such a no-brainer in terms of casting. So it was just sort of came in phases, I guess, as in terms of who this character was and what she'd be like.
Well, I mean, you guys killed it. You're bringing in a whole new person and like it's going to change the dynamic, but it changed it in such a positive way. Like you really felt that like uplifted, like Kaela's kind of coming in. Yeah, this is new for her, but also she's bringing that like positivity to these girls who like have dealt with so much.
The perfect person to enter your life when you're grieving. We did the Paige thing with Macy in terms of the you know, the hidden secret sister. So we really wanted to, one, not only not do that and replicate it again, but also build a mystery out of who she was and not just tell you in the first episode, oh, here's a new character. This is why she's a charm one. Go. I was personally really inspired just by the Rey storyline in the recent Star Wars. To me, that was like the thing I cared most about watching those three movies. I don't like where they ended it, where they landed it, and who she really is, but I love the mystery that they built in terms of who she is. And we really wanted to take that concept and build that same mystery, but flip it on its head and say, you don't need to be Emperor Palpatine's daughter to be special and you don't need to be a biologically connected to be a chosen one. Anyone can be a chosen one. Anyone. It is not about biology. And you know who your parents are. It's about so much more. And so that was sort of always our intention this season, to take that myth and sort of subvert it.
The origins had us theorizing so much. And I think we still have so many questions around, things around that. So Sean Michael on YouTube wanted to know, what was that exact reason why Kaela's birth parents ended up giving her up for adoption?
I think asking that question is not the point of the story that we were telling. Look, we talked about a reason why these people did, but I think going into it, Kaela thought, okay, we set her up with a storyline, an origin story that was sort of mythical intentionally, like Harry Potter left on the doorstep, or Moses sent down the basket as a baby. Like you feel like, oh, that must be the reason. I must have given up because I'm special, because they knew I was a chosen one, because they knew I had this life ahead of me, and that's why they must have done it. That's the only reason they must have done it. And that's what you think watching these movies and these stories of heroes' journeys. Like that's always the origin. And then when Kaela realizes they're human, and they didn't even know about magic, they had no idea who she was, and she realizes that's not why they gave me up. They gave me up for very human reasons. They were just two human beings going through something, and they decided that they weren't ready for a kid. And so that's why Kaela says, you don't need to. I'm not here to dwell on the past, because she realizes it's not what it's about. So that's why we didn't show it on screen, because it didn't matter anymore to Kaela. She wasn't here to sort of blame these people for the choices they made in the past. But realistically, they were 22 years old and they had careers ahead of them, and they didn't think they were ready to be parents. And, in some version of that is probably what happened.
And so now we also learned this season, like kind of what you were saying of connecting back to Macy, that Kaela is a charmed one after, going through this cancer treatment that Macy had donated stem cells to when she thought her dad was dying of cancer. And just so many mind-blowing realizations here. I cannot tell you how I lost my mind when Dexter came back. I didn't think that was a thing that was possible.
So excited to bring Dexter back. One, Leonard, who plays him, is amazing. Also from the Heroes family from back in the day. So it was great to get him on the show. And I loved working with him. Rupert and I loved working with him back in season 2. And so we were so excited to get him on the show again. And also just for Maggie, it is the character who I think more than anyone she needed to talk to and to understand who she was as a person. So we always intended the season to build to a point where Maggie got to have that moment. And when we realized we could both answer the Macy Kaela question and the Maggie emotional question at the same time through the same person, it just felt like the right character at the right time.
It was a beautiful thing. I was like, these beautiful moments of closure. We're getting the answers, and it also addressed some things that I think we learned in like previous seasons, like when Maggie was learning, like, oh, actually, Mel is your half sister. Macy is your full blood sister, and like, answering questions there, and like finding out that she's like half Black and things like that. Yeah. That were kind of addressed, and then now you kind of got those full circle moments. So that was, wow. I was like, Dexter, I can't believe it.
Dexter, man. Oh.
But now that we know, obviously, where Kaela's abilities come from, we got a bunch more questions. First off, why go a different power route than what Macy's abilities were?
The power in this show has always been connected to kind of personality. In the beginning of the first season, Maggie's the one who is always worried what other people are thinking because she's insecure, and she develops the ability to hear what people are thinking. And like that same... Macy had control issues, so she got to control things like that. The power comes not just from biology, but from the sort of soul of who you are as a person. And so it wouldn't make sense, even if Kaela had Macy's DNA via the stem cells, it wouldn't make sense to get the same power because they're very different people. And so based on that and sort of what was established in the first season in terms of how you get your power, we decided to go with a power that was very core to Kaela's being as the artist who's always trying to create and to manifest her ideas. The manifester made a lot of sense to us, and it was a fun power that we'd not seen on the show before. And so, yeah, that's why we went that route.
His name is D wanted to know, like, was there any talks about Kaela maybe showcasing any of Macy's demon powers, or would that maybe have been something that would have come up in season 5, if at all?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to explore it in season 5. It wasn't, like, there's so much going on this season. Kaela was dealing with so much. To throw you might be a demon on top of it all at the end there, which just felt like too much. It was just too much. So we really wanted to deal with that in season 5, where that Macy's demon side and whether Kaela has it was something that was, we were going to bring up right away, but unfortunately, fanfic.
Season 1 obviously introduced us to a handful of magical creatures, and then season 4 brought us back into that world. We got introduced to Dev and Roxy. We got, to see some older, fan favorites like Chloe the Pixie. We got to, go to this new location of Blue Camellia. What was that like? And like, do you think, like, did you have like any favorite magical beings that maybe you just really loved or would maybe have come back down the line?
I love Chloe. As soon as we I loved her so much in season 1, and so it was like very important to me when we were bringing these magical creatures back that Chloe was one of them, because I think Emily Bader, who plays her, is so funny, like so goddamn funny and talented, and it was really important to get her in for 3 episodes this season. We showed Rita and Nita, those 2 older ladies, in episode 5, just purely because Rupert, who directed it, and Jen Powell, our makeup artist, both like lobbied intensively to get those women back on the show just for a fun little cameo. And luckily they were available, and we did, because they're amazing and hilarious, and they're such talented women.
At the end of season 3, something happens to Jordan that, had us all curious throughout this season. Like, is Jordan a white lighter? Is he something else? And for people who've been following along with my videos, I've been teasing that not only were we going to get to speak with Joey, but we were going to have an interview with another surprise charm star coming. If you're a subscriber to my Patreon, patreon.com/Kmaldo, then you already know who this guest is. You've known for a little while. You've even seen some behind the scenes pics. But I'm excited to share now that upcoming interview is with Jordan Donica. And now I mention this because in our interview, Jordan shared that he didn't think his character was really a white lighter and was more of like a magical healer that sort of connected back to his army days. But he didn't know what lied ahead for him. So I wanted to hear from you, Joey, what is the real answer as to like what Jordan has become, and would we have explored that more in a 5th season?
He's not a white lighter. He certainly had a power surge connected to Harry's, and there's a reason, but there's a reason he didn't get the orbing that goes along with being a white lighter. He only got the healing because, as I said earlier, the way powers connect to personality and sort of the soul in this show, like that is who he's always been. He's always been that medic, the guy that he had a first aid kit, the first scene we ever saw in season 2, episode 1. Getting the magical ability to do that was sort of why that's how it manifested in him. And as we established in the previous season, like white lighters are problematic in this world, in the Reboot's world. Of course, they are what they are in the original show, but like the way the Reboot has crafted white lighters, it's a very problematic thing. And I wouldn't want to be a white lighter if I were Jordan. I'd want to set out and craft a new identity for myself outside of that construct. And plus, he has both halves of his soul. He wasn't split the way other white lighters were. So he's definitely not.
I want to get into sort of like this, the whole like, crux of this season with the Charmed origin story. Daryl Davis on YouTube wanted to know how difficult was it to line up the pieces to kind of create this Charmed origin story. And I'm curious about that too, because, season 4, you really pulled things from the past and kind of like picked and chose different things to kind of bring back and kind of pull that story together. So, how did you guys do that?
So that was something we always wanted to do. We talked about it for years. Like, how did the Power of 3 start? Where did the Charmed Ones come from? The original show has its own version of the origin story. But it was, again, important for us to do something a little different. And we felt that it should be older. The original show really kind of connects to the Salem witch trials as kind of an origin. But for us, that was like, okay, that was fine on the, when these were white witches, but these are, in our world, like these are witches of color. Their magic dates back much further and longer into the past. And we wanted to go back thousands and thousands of years to do that and to show that. And so it just never came to be in previous seasons, but we realized this season, like, we really want to tell that story. We really want the girls to know like where they come from and how they connect. So in building the big bad arc of the season, it just only felt natural to use that to get at this Charmed origin story and tell the story of a sisterhood gone awry.
Did you always know like that you guys wanted it to be like the Lost One, the ultimate big bad, was going to be a Charmed one? And like, how did you choose those actresses to kind of like represent this, iconic ancient magic?
Yes, from the very first day of season 4, we knew we were building to a reveal that an original Charmed one was our big bad. So yeah, that was always the plan. In terms of the actresses, one was the woman who we did previously known as the Guardian, Candace McClure, who's lovely and amazing. But so she was who she was, and we'd sort of established her one way. But we really wanted to sort of unpack a different side to that character, not just the mythical being in the robe that sort of gave cryptic warnings, but someone with her own kind of messed up past and personality, and to find out that side about her with Inara. Like Nazneen, contractor who played her, is an old friend of mine. And as soon as we started talking about this character, Nazneen was like the first person I thought about for it and wanted to. So I emailed our casting director immediately when we wrote this episode 11 to see if Naz was available. And thankfully she was. So she just embodies that person so well. Just this, like, she has this, like, this presence where you're just sort of in awe. Like, you're in awe of her, everything she does. And that's who we needed to be that sort of queen in episode 12. And then Lauren, who played Ashani, is like a comic actress, and she has a comedy background, and that's what we wanted. Ivy Malone, our writer's assistant who co-wrote episode 11 with me, kind of created that character personality from scratch. I didn't know what she was going to do. She just turned in that script with this like zany woman who jumps out of a pickup truck and starts talking about the 60s and her van that she drove over. And I was just like, this is crazy. This is not what I expected, but I loved it. And so after Ivy wrote that, we went after comedians, and Lauren is so funny. And she pulled it off pulled it off beautifully. And that way, like, we really wanted these three very different personalities, and three different racial backgrounds, and all these different things that show that these were not simply, biological sisters. These were sisters that came together, kind of like Kaela, Mel, and Maggie.
Critic OGS wants to know, like, how was Inara able to have the power of 3 in her when originally you needed like 3 witches?
Even if one witch can hold all that power, should she? There's a reason you have 3. There's like, it's like we wanted to sort of showcase it's like the checks and balances idea if you're looking at the government, or like the idea of the way that a pyramid is perfectly balanced because the 3 sides support each other. And so it's not like one person can't hold the power of 3. It's that you shouldn't. And look what happens to Inara when she tries. I mean, look what she became emotionally, and it sort of tore her apart. So yeah, it's not a physical thing so much as like it's like the support system of the 3 that is, at least in this version of Charmed, what we wanted to say about why you need the power of 3.
I'm imagining that question maybe came from having certain knowledge of that original series when we kind of know not everything is 100% the same.
That's the thing. A lot of people look at the show and they're like, well, why? How could they take the Book of Shadows in episode 10? Because the Book of Shadows fights off whoever tries to touch it. But that's never been established in this show. That is something from the original show. And so sometimes people try to impose rules from the original Charmed onto this Charmed, and the rules aren't always the same. Like, they're just not. And so it made it hard, I think, for some people to watch, and they got really frustrated. But like, we made up our own rules.
And speaking of the OG Charmed, obviously the end of this series kind of starts establishing some connections. Yes. I want to start with that video store and a little bit more about Diana, because she's sort of the one that's first introduced, that's like, oh, there's a connection to like this other world, multiverse. We're about to have the 3 Spider-Men.
Right.
So what can you tell us about Diana and kind of what that really means for this world, and like how she would have maybe connected moving forward?
There was one version where we talked about casting a white letter from the original Charmed, casting one of the actual Leo or someone from the OG Charmed. But then right away you would have known where the story was going. You would have known, oh, clearly we're going to connect to the OG Charmed. We know how the season's going to end. So we wanted to cast someone different, someone who now is from that world, but you don't recognize them from that world if you're a fan of the original show. That's why we went with Natasha and Diana. She's just a white lighter from the original world who, maybe in the last 15 years after that show ended, maybe had a friendship with Phoebe, Halliwell, and maybe they worked together a little bit. Who knows what they decided? Who knows? Those 15 years have gone by. Lots of new things have changed in the OG Charm world, I'm sure. We knew we wanted kind of like an interdimensional place, like a nexus point to connect the worlds. And we just sort of pitched around zany ideas for what that could be. And I think Carrie Williams, our staff writer, at one point just pitched the video, like an abandoned Blockbuster, basically. And we're like, that's so weird. And that gives us some really cool stuff to play with in episodes 12 and 13 with the videotapes and all that. So that's where we started with it. And then just because it was weird and funny and something we've never seen before. And then when we were designing it, Ken Rempel, our designer, was just pitching around ideas, and we started talking about this sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey look, like this white, just everything's white and brightly lit, and it felt so surreal and unlike any. It felt like another world, and so we just did it because it was weird. That's the answer.
Turquoise Supreme wants to know, like, was the Charmed one who created this video store, was that Phoebe Halliwell?
Yeah, it was Phoebe Halliwell.
And now in the final moments of this season, we find our Charmed ones in a really great place. We've got great happy endings for everyone, which I was glad about. I was nervous about Jordan. I was like, please don't kill Jordan. And now they're opening this door into what looks like the Halliwell Manor porch. And we had some really nice comments from Too Swole for Baby Gap saying thank you for an ending that was a full circle moment between the new and the OG series while leaving room for a beautiful future. So much thought and love was shared this season. Thank you to all the writers. And we had another nice comment from Goikin who says, I was rooting for a final shot with the Manor door closing and Joey didn't disappoint. Gave us the OG Manor for us OG fans as well. Great job. While it was an awesome tribute, I'm like, it opened up so many more questions I think that we never.
I know.
So what can you tell us about that? Like about them showing up on that Halliwell Manor porch and going inside? Like, what does that mean? Were they looking for someone? Would they have stayed there in a fifth season? What can you share?
There will not be a fifth season. The show is over. So this is all speculative, and people can dream about whatever they want and fanfic it in whatever direction they want. But I will tell you what the plan was for us if we did get a pickup. We knew it had to be a flexible plan because we were going, as soon as we got a pickup, we were going to talk to the studio and putting phone calls to Shannon and Alyssa and Holly and Rose and see who's available and who's interested. And we can't force them to do this show. So like we couldn't like write out a storyline in advance that said we needed Prue, we needed Piper, because we didn't know who we could get. So we're just gonna start making phone calls and see who would do it. And also, talk to our cast about who they were excited about working with and get the best combination of people. But the plan was to basically introduce 3 universes, not just an infinite multiverse, because I feel like we've seen it.
There's a lot of multiverse
stuff right now. A little charm with the power of 3, and everything is about 3s. What if, the triquetra and its origins, those 3 overlapping shapes, are actually 3 universes that overlap? And so there's the Vera universe, there's the Halliwell universe, and then there's a 3rd universe that we were also going to go to in season 5. So that way we wouldn't have to spend the whole season in the Halliwell universe because, frankly, we couldn't afford it. Like, we don't have that house. We don't have that scene. We built the front porch in Vancouver for the actresses to talk on, a replica, but then we shot a drone in Los Angeles where the actual house is. We can't shoot in Los Angeles regularly on our show. It was really expensive and complicated just to get that one shot. And so to do many episodes using that house was basically impossible. So we needed a system by which we could get there, start those stories, but then get out of there as quickly as possible so we can get back to Vancouver and do our show the way we can afford to shoot it as a CW show, because we are not Game of Thrones. We were going to, ideally meet. Again, it was very actress based. Whoever we could get, whoever it was going to be, we're going to build it around that. Connect the Veras and the Halliwells and all that, but also introduce a threat that transcends the 3 universes. A demon. We talked about some from the original show that we were going to try to incorporate, or possibly one of their children, like Wyatt, gone bad. But someone, again, it was all very dependent on who we were able to get to cast. But anyway, they were going to solve a problem in the Halliwell world. It was going to bring them back to the Vera world, but that problem was going to follow them, and the answer was going to take them to this 3rd world. And so most of the season was actually going to be spent in that 3rd universe, where we were going to meet. This might be super controversial, but we were going to introduce a trio of male charmed ones in that universe. And they were going to be, and you'd see what the world looked like if kind of dudes were the charm ones. And these were not going to be great dudes. They're going to be kind of bros. And there's a reason. You would learn through this that there's a reason that women have this power and in these other universes, and why there's a better balance in that way. But so you'd meet these 3 dude charm ones. We'll see whichever one of the original charm ones would have stayed, and you'd have our girls. And the way they'd solve one problem that could have transcended those 3 universes and not just save the world, but save not the multiverse, but the triverse of Charmed that was going to be the plan for season 5.
What? I love it so much. That's incredible. Oh my God. What a story. Wow.
So hopefully someone out there can write a super awesome version of it, where the beauty of fanfic is you don't need to cast, you don't need to call agents and see which actresses are available. You can have all the characters at your disposal, so they can write anyone they want into it.
Do you think realistically any of the original actresses would have gotten on board to do anything like that?
Don't know. I really think Shannon would. I know she's been battling breast cancer, and I don't know what her health is like, but I know, I think she's someone who we would have really been excited to get back, even if it was just for one episode, even if it was just for a few scenes, whatever she's willing to do. Alyssa's running for, I don't know, she's in politics now, and who knows what her availability would be. I know Holly and Rose had a lot of issues with the reboot, so I don't know if they would have been interested in at all. And again, it's like it's so hard to know. But I bet we could have gotten one of them.
I'm curious, like if it was Prue, like is this a different universe where she's still alive?
There was a plan for how we could have resurrected Prue if Prue were to be the, if Shannon were to be the actress that was available. But again, we'll never know. People
are also very intrigued about the door closing. Sean, not Mendes, wanted to know, like, is that Prue or Macy or anybody? I had also some theories in my live stream. Could that have just been the wind? Or the magic of the home, So I don't know if you guys had thought about it, or if you even had, like, even if it's not canon, your own theories of how that door shut.
We would have explained who it was in the 5th season, again, based on who was available. Like if Shannon was available, it was going to be Prue. And we learned that if she wasn't, and we would have to introduce a different telekinetic who could have done it. And, we had plans. Again, everything had to be loose and flexible because we didn't know what it would be. So the truth is we didn't decide who it was officially because it was going to be so season 5 dependent. So people I don't think it was Macy. Macy didn't exist in that universe. They crossed over. So I don't think the answer is Macy. I think the answer has to be someone from that universe or a very strong breeze. So well timed.
The fact that nobody was there is like, were they coming in and they would have had to like help whoever, and that would tie back to this bigger being.
Exactly. There's a threat and they were in danger, and yes, exactly. So it would have been a help them out situation. Yeah.
We're gonna get into some rapid fire non-season specific questions. Critico GS wanted to know if you could bring back any OG demon now that there's kind of like this path between the universes, who would you want to bring back?
What I was going to push for in season 5 was going to be Barbas, the fear demon. I think it's a very cool demon that would have opened up a lot of doors story-wise. And also the actor who played him tragically has died. So it would have allowed us to sort of cast any Barbas we needed. So it just was easy practically.
A great one. He came back so many times. A lot of history there.
Fear never dies, whatever he says. Yeah.
Something that I thought was interesting was like there was this moment in this season where like the girls had to like sort of put their powers together to help Maggie have a vision. So it was like a way to combine their powers that wasn't the power of 3. Would you guys do anything like that? And could their powers combine in other ways to kind of do other things?
Yeah, we didn't get to do enough of it, frankly. I wish we had done more. But the idea was like the old power of 3 that worked with Macy, the whole like Potentia Trium blast. We wanted to move past that because there's a new person in it's a new power of 3. There's a new third. And it was going to be, it was sort of there. I don't think we did a good job showing it or building it, but maybe one of my regrets this season. But the idea being like the power of 3 is like where 2 of them basically transfer their energy to the third to boost their power or to expand their power. And it was like a sisterly support turbocharge that we sort of see a little bit in the first episode when Kaela's able to sort of get a hold of her art, and Maggie's able to get a stronger vision for the first time. And yeah, honestly, we should have done more of it to really showcase that and its potential.
That's a very cool, kind of like reworking though. You also teased for us on Twitter that Ray's inside guy Chuchi would have been revealed to be Nico. How would that have worked out?
Well, the spell was undone in the second last episode of season 1. So she was freed of that. And she did know about magic in the final episode before she left. So like we wouldn't have run into spell complications. I like to think she spent the last 3 years out there working with Ray, keeping tabs on Mel, helping Mel from afar. Because she cares about her. She'll always care about her. And it would have been really interesting to me to sort of like have Mel be in love with Roxy when the old love of her life shows up. And now what? Mm-hmm. I don't know what the answer would have been, but it would have been fun to explore in season 5. If Ellen Tamaki was available, who knows? She's on Manifest. She's super talented. She's busy. But that would have been the hope.
Simply Simple wanted to know if Parker ever got a happy ending.
Oh, poor Parker. I like to think he probably didn't. I bet he got like killed by a demon in some college bar, and I don't think Parker got a happy ending.
What were some of your favorite episodes across the series?
Episode 15, the Medusa episode, I loved episode 16, where you reveal Charity behind their mother's death with that sort of structure where Macy's, or they kept like losing their memory. I thought that was like really well done. In season 2, episodes 17 and 18 were my favorite. The heist episode at 8:17, where they like go to that party and like at the Shea group, and they do this like awesome heist. It's so good. It's so beautifully done. And then 18 was the first episode I did with Rupert, where we learned Macy's past with those flashbacks, and like I had such a fun time doing that. I thought it worked out really well. And then in season 4, I thought we had a couple of amazing episodes, like the penultimate, where the ladies die, and where everybody dies, and then the videotape is sent back to Josefina. Like, I think that might be my favorite Charmed episode of all time.
That was a great one. I also, obviously, I love the Medusa one, and the 20s episode that Rupert directed. I
20s was super fun.
But yeah, the whole, when you guys like brought in that utopia, I was like, where are we? What is happening? Like, you really transformed the whole world. I was like, whew, this is great.
It was a crazy ass episode. Blake Taylor wrote it and Stuart Gallar directed it, and they both just knocked it out of the park.
Tyrick wants to know, who do you think was a better option for Maggie, Jordan or Parker?
Oh, I think Jordan's a much better person, just a better human being and I mean that like not from a magical standpoint, but like from a soul. I think he brought out the best in her. And I think so, yeah, he was a much better partner. Parker's like that early fling when you're just figuring yourself out, you know, the bad boy who you realize isn't right for you.
Gobble_Ryan wants to know, like, what is your ideal episode number for a season? Like, is 22 too many? Is 13 too little? Like, what's the sweet spot for you guys?
Writing 13 was pretty nice this season. You can really write a tight story where there's not a lot of filler. I think 18 for a show like Charmed could be great, because you can have more like Monster of the Week type episodes, special, you know, like the time travel episode, like those specialty kind of one-offs. So somewhere between 13 and 18, not 22.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Bree B222 wants to know, like, do you think Maggie is ever going to graduate college or have a graduation?
Yeah, sure. But I've always actually seen Maggie, what I kept wanting to do, and where I think that the story would go, is like becoming a therapist for magical creatures, like healing the traumas. You know, they're always like saving lives, but you know, all those like wars and battles in the magical world, it leaves people traumatized, and they need help from they need emotional help. They need mental health care. And Maggie sort of being out there doing therapy for magical creatures, I think is sort of like where she goes in life.
To wrap things up, I'm going to ask our 2 most asked questions. Is there potential to save the show somewhere, whether it be another network, a comic, a short TV movie?
Look, as much as I wish the show could go on, there's not going to be another season of this iteration of Charmed. It's just it just happened at a really messy time with the CW being potentially sold and cutting back their programming, and the places that typically save shows like Netflix are hurting financially. Netflix's stock dropped 70% this year. They're cutting back the cost. They're not saving shows anymore. And the same goes for the other streamers. So like, it's just bad timing. And so there's not a savior out there. It's just not going to be worth it economically for any of those places. So we've folded up our sets are gone. Our cast is released from their contracts. Like it's definitely over now. Whether they decide to reboot Charmed again in the future or do something with it many years down the road, I'm sure that'll happen, but I don't think anyone from this iteration will be a part of it.
And then the second part of it is people want to know like what you're doing next, where they can follow you, even outside the show. People want to support your career.
That's really nice. 2 main things I'm working on. I have a show in development with a good friend of mine named Tracy Oliver, who she wrote the movie Girls Trip, and she created Harlem on Amazon. And she's an amazing, hilarious writer. We've been friends since film school, since we were young children. And she and I are adapting a book into a show at Amazon Freevee. It's their new like ad supported streaming service. It's kind of like a juicy, soapy murder mystery with a little bit of voodoo set in Savannah, Georgia. And it's super fun, and hopefully they decide to make it. And we're working on that right now. And then I'm working with Tracy on another show of hers at Apple.
Oh, I love that. Well, whatever you're doing, we're going to follow you and, make sure to watch it, check it out, support. And then of course, my last thing, did you take anything from the set before you left?
So, that's the problem with the show shooting in Vancouver is that I haven't been to set since episode 5. I've been home, I've had a baby. I haven't been able to go back to set. So I didn't know we were getting canceled last time I was there. So I put in a request for the Book of Shadows. I don't know if I'm going to get it. I asked them to send it to me, and if they can, they will. All I have from the set is a sign. You may have noticed it in the bathroom of the Blue Camellia that says, like, no matter what your species is, wash your hands, and it shows pictures of all these different creatures. I have that hanging in my bathroom. So that's it.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know we just filled up 5 years in 2 hours.
I know, it was amazing. These questions were so great. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you so much to Joey Falco for joining us to talk all things Charmed. You can watch the video podcast at youtube.com/Kaymaldo. That's KAYMALDO. Listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening platforms, and even get more insight at the news outlet popcultureplanet.net. You can keep up with the podcast by following me pretty much everywhere at Kaymaldo or the show at Pop Cult Planet. You can also support the podcast with your very own Pop Culture Planet merch at teespring.com/stores/Kaymaldo. If you enjoyed the episodes, consider subscribing so you know when a new one is posted. Rate and review this podcast and share it with your fellow pop culture lovers. Thanks for listening. It's been a blast, and I'll catch you in the latest episode. Consider subscribing if you like my videos, and if you want to talk more TV and movies with me outside of the comments section, check out the exclusive Discord available on my Patreon at patreon.com/Kaymaldo. If you like this one, you can check out more of my videos right over here. See ya!